I spent 4 years on the manifestation roller coaster before I figured out what was actually going wrong. The techniques worked sometimes, then they didn't. Then they did again, no pattern I could see. I knew all of Neville's methods: SATs, revision, mental diet, scripting. I could execute them perfectly during practice sessions. But my self concept work kept reverting. Here's what I discovered: most people approach self concept like identity renovation. They're trying to build a new self image through affirmations and visualization. But Neville taught something completely different. He taught occupancy, not construction. And there's a specific reason why the construction approach guarantees your work will revert. It's happening during the hours you think you're not doing the work. Tonight, I'm going to show you the 4 mistakes that make self concept work temporary and the shift that makes it permanent. Because if you've been practicing for months and still sliding back into old patterns of self talk and limitation, the problem isn't your technique. The problem is that you're only applying it 1 hour per day. 1 hour per day. Let me show you the 4 mistakes that guarantee your self concept work will revert and what Neville actually meant by each one. The first mistake is treating states as achievements. Most LOA teachers will tell you to build your confidence through daily affirmations. They're wrong. Confidence isn't something you develop, it's something you occupy, like walking into a room. Neville taught something completely different in The Power of Awareness. He said states are, not states become, states are. Here's a pattern I've watched repeat with student after student. They spend weeks doing morning affirmations. I am confident, I am worthy, I am successful. They feel good during the practice. Sometimes they carry that feeling for hours. But by afternoon, they're checking their bank account with anxiety. By evening, they're complaining about their boss. By bedtime, they're worried about tomorrow. They treated the confident state like a destination to reach instead of a reality to inhabit. Neville understood this distinction because he came from mystical Christianity, not psychology. In mystical traditions, states of consciousness are realms of being, not emotional conditions. When Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions," he was describing states. You don't build mansions, you enter them. The mansion of confidence exists. The mansion of abundance exists. The mansion of love exists. Your work isn't construction, your work is occupancy. But before I show you how to occupy states correctly, there's a specific test that tells you whether you're actually in the state or just visiting it temporarily. I'll give you that test in a moment, because without it, you'll never know if you're making progress or just cycling through the same pattern. But even when people understand states, they make the second mistake: part-time occupancy. Most practitioners occupy their desired state during SATs or affirmation sessions, then abandon it immediately after. They do 20 minutes of "I am wealthy" consciousness at night, then spend the next day thinking like someone who struggles with money. They check prices, they postpone purchases, they feel guilty about spending, they complain about bills. Then they wonder why the wealth consciousness isn't taking hold. Actually, wait, let me give you the context first. Neville addressed this directly in Feeling is the Secret. He taught that sleep is when consciousness accepts or rejects the impressions of the day. But here's what gets missed: the state you occupy as you fall asleep becomes the blueprint for tomorrow's automatic responses. Most people fall asleep in whatever state the day left them in: worry about tomorrow's meeting, frustration about today's conversation, anxiety about money. Then they wake up tomorrow programmed for more of the same limitations. I've seen this exact mistake in person after person who knows the techniques perfectly but sees inconsistent results. They can get into the state during practice. They abandon it the moment practice ends. The technique becomes a temporary vacation from their actual consciousness instead of a permanent relocation. This connects directly to the third mistake, which happens so automatically most people don't notice they're doing it: unconscious loyalty to limitations. In his teachings from the late 40s, Neville said, "Man is faithful to that which he is conscious of being." But most people are unconsciously faithful to their limitations. They consciously practice abundance while unconsciously remaining loyal to familiar patterns of lack. They do their wealth visualization at night, then spend the day with internal commentary like, that's expensive. I can't afford that. Money doesn't grow on trees. I'm not lucky with money. I'll be honest about something. This took me embarrassingly long to figure out. Every casual I am declaration is an act of creation. I am tired. I am broke. I am unlucky. I am behind. People make dozens of these declarations per day without realizing they're actively programming limitation. Neville called this the resurrection principle. Whatever state you claim with I am is resurrected in your experience. Most teachers focus only on conscious I am statements. They ignore the unconscious ones happening hundreds of times per day. That's the part that matters most. Take someone who has been practicing SATs for 6 months. Every night, they visualize from the state of the successful person. They feel it, they sustain it, they fall asleep in it. But the next day, when a client cancels, their immediate internal response is, this always happens to me. I'm not cut out for this business. Maybe I should just get a regular job. That unconscious response just claimed the state of someone who fails in business. And that unconscious claim carries more weight than the conscious practice because it happened in a moment of emotional intensity. Here's the test I promised you, the test for whether you're actually in the state or just visiting it. Watch your automatic reactions to unexpected circumstances. If someone cuts you off in traffic, what's your first internal response? If a bill arrives that's higher than expected, what thought pattern activates? If someone cancels a meeting, what story do you immediately tell yourself? Those automatic reactions reveal your true occupied state, not your practice sessions. Now, here's the counterintuitive part that separates successful practitioners from the ones who stay stuck. There's a specific moment, right after an automatic reaction reveals your old state, where most people make the fatal error. I'm going to show you exactly what that moment looks like and what to do instead. Neville knew this pattern because he spent decades watching students succeed temporarily then revert. The successful ones learned to catch their unconscious loyalty to old states. The unsuccessful ones kept practicing techniques while remaining faithful to familiar limitations. And here's where I want to give you something practical you can use immediately. If you want to go deeper on this, I've put together a complete state architecture diagnostic in the description below. It's free, link in the description. Now, the fourth mistake, using revision as editing instead of recognition. If you've been doing revision for months, but your self-concept keeps snapping back to old patterns, the problem isn't the technique. The problem is you're treating revision like a band-aid for embarrassing moments instead of recognition of your true timeline. Most people treat revision like a technique to fix past mistakes. Something embarrassing happened today, so tonight they revise it to feel better about it. But Neville taught revision as recognition of what your true self would have experienced. When you revise a conversation or event, you're not changing history. You're aligning with the timeline where the version of you that you truly are had that better experience. Here's the story Neville told repeatedly during his Los Angeles teaching period. A woman came to his lectures who had successfully manifested a better job through visualization. She saw herself in the position, felt the satisfaction, fell asleep in the wish fulfilled. Within weeks, she got the job. Perfect technique, perfect execution. But she lost the position within 3 months. Why? Because she continued thinking like someone who got lucky rather than someone who naturally attracted opportunities. She never occupied the state of the person who belonged in that position. When she came to Neville confused about what went wrong, he explained the difference between temporary achievement and sustained embodiment. She had used the technique to get something, but she had never become someone. The moment challenges appeared in the new role, she reverted to her old self-concept. I'm probably not qualified for this. They're going to figure out I don't belong here. I was lucky to get this job, but I'm not lucky enough to keep it. That's when Neville introduced her to proper revision. Not revision to fix the job situation, but revision to recognize what the version of herself who belonged in that position would have experienced all along. She revised her entire career history from the consciousness of someone who naturally attracted opportunities. She revised conversations with confidence instead of anxiety. She revised meetings as collaboration instead of judgment. She revised challenges as growth instead of proof of inadequacy. The revision wasn't editing the past, it was recognizing the timeline where her true self had been expressing all along. Within months, she not only got her position back, she was promoted. Because she had finally occupied the state instead of just borrowing the technique. You can do exactly what I'm describing. The mechanism works for anyone who applies it. The only reason I figured it out was 4 years of inconsistent results, forcing me to track patterns. These four mistakes create a deeper pattern that explains why self concept work feels like pushing a boulder uphill. Remember when I mentioned occupancy versus construction at the beginning? This is where that becomes practical. All four mistakes stem from the same fundamental misunderstanding, treating self concept as psychological construction rather than state occupancy. Modern self help teaches identity renovation. Neville taught consciousness relocation. These are completely different approaches with completely different results. The way self concept is usually taught is backwards. Teachers tell you to start with affirmations about who you want to become, then build evidence through action. Neville didn't teach it that way. The actual sequence is occupancy first, then natural expression of that occupied state. You don't affirm your way into confidence. You occupy confidence, then speak and act from that occupied reality. But here's the crucial detail that determines whether state occupancy becomes permanent or temporary. There's something that happens in your baseline consciousness, the moment you wake up each morning, that either locks in your new state or erases it completely. I'll show you exactly what that is now, because this is what separates the people who get lasting results from the people who cycle through techniques forever. In psychological construction, you're building something new. You start with low confidence and work to build high confidence. You start with scarcity consciousness and work to build abundance consciousness. The entire framework assumes you're inadequate now and becoming adequate later. This approach guarantees reversion because it's built on the foundation that something is wrong with you that needs to be fixed. In consciousness relocation, you're recognizing what already is. Confidence exists as a state. Abundance exists as a state. Love exists as a state. Success exists as a state. Your work isn't building these states, your work is occupying them. The framework assumes nothing is wrong with you. You simply need to relocate your consciousness to the state that matches your desire. This distinction is why Neville constantly referenced biblical language about renewal. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. It doesn't mean fix your broken psychology. It means recognize your true nature and stop occupying states that contradict it. Renewing means returning to what was always true, not creating something new. When you understand this distinction, everything changes. Instead of working to become confident, you recognize that confidence is a state you can enter right now. Instead of working to become abundant, you recognize that abundance is a state you can occupy this moment. Instead of working to become loved, you recognize that love is a state you can inhabit immediately. Here's what happens in your baseline consciousness that I promise to show you. The moment you wake up, before you're fully conscious, your mind automatically returns to its most familiar pattern. This is what I call the morning trap. Most people wake up and immediately check their phone, which activates whatever emotional state their notifications trigger. Or they wake up and their first thought is about today's problems. That first 3 minutes of consciousness programs your entire day. If you wake up and immediately occupy your desired state, before checking anything external, that state becomes your baseline for the next 16 hours. But if you wake up and let external circumstances determine your consciousness, you'll spend the entire day trying to recover the state you practiced the night before. Let me show you what I mean here. Everything we've covered addresses the 1 hour of conscious practice. Your unmanaged hours determine whether the state compounds or evaporates. I spent years focusing on perfecting my SATS technique. Longer sessions, more vivid imagery, more intense feeling. But the breakthrough didn't come from better technique. It came from paying attention to what happened to my consciousness between practice sessions. I was building state in 1 hour and dismantling it in the remaining hours. The technique was perfect. The state architecture was broken. Here's exactly what to do tonight. First, you'll identify which of the four mistakes is your primary pattern. Most people have one dominant mistake and two secondary ones. Second, you'll choose one specific area of your self concept to focus on. Not your entire identity, one specific aspect. Confidence in social situations, worthiness in relationships, capability in your work. Third, instead of trying to build that quality, you'll practice occupying the state where it's already true. Not becoming confident, being confident, not developing worthiness, occupying worthiness. Fourth, you'll extend that occupancy beyond your practice session. When you catch yourself thinking from the old state, you'll relocate to the true state, not as correction, but as recognition. The shift happens faster than you expect once you stop trying to build something new and start occupying what already exists. But it only becomes permanent when you maintain occupancy across your full day, not just during the hour you think you're doing the work. The reason your self concept work keeps reverting isn't that you're missing some advanced technique. It's that you're only occupying your desired state during the hour you think you're doing the work. The occupancy is 1 hour. The abandonment is the other 23 hours. You've been treating self concept like a practice session instead of a way of being. But states don't exist in practice sessions. States exist in consciousness. And consciousness runs around the clock, not just during the moments you're paying attention to it. When I had this same realization myself, in year 4 of practicing Neville's work, here's what I found. I had been on what I call the manifestation roller coaster for 4 years. The techniques worked sometimes, then they didn't, then they did again. No pattern I could see. I knew SATs perfectly. I knew revision perfectly. I knew mental diet perfectly. But my results stayed inconsistent. Then I noticed what was happening between practice sessions, not during. My self talk reverted. My reactions to circumstances reverted. The morning trap destroyed entire nights of practice. I started tracking my consciousness across full days. Time stamped journal entries, 2 years of pattern mapping. That became the protocol I now call state architecture. That's exactly why I built the source code Diagnostic. It walks you through where your specific gap lives during your unmanaged hours. The four mistakes we covered, the state architecture protocol, the unconscious loyalty patterns, it's the complete framework I wish someone had given me in year 1. It's free, link in the description below. That's the next step after the realization we just covered. Try this tonight. Pick one area of your self concept. Instead of working to improve it, practice occupying the state where it's already true. Then extend that occupancy beyond your practice session. Notice what happens in the hours that follow. That's where your answer lives. Neville said in his teachings from 1952, "Man is what he believes himself to be." He meant what you believe about yourself in every moment, not just during the moments you're consciously affirming. If this resonated, subscribe so we can keep going deeper together. Until next time.